All right, so hello everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Runarcana Academy. Today we are going to be looking at Techmaturgy. And Techmaturgy is overall a craft. It used to be a designated class, and we're going to be looking at how things have changed, what Techmaturgy looks like, and how we can make the most out of the craft even if, we don't really know a whole lot about it. So we're gonna explore together. So the first thing that I wanted to mention was just some personal bias. My favorite class in 5th edition is the Artificer. My best friend plays a Techmaturge in our campaign back when it was a class. So we have been looking at what the new system looks like now that it is only a craft. So briefly, what it was previously in older editions was a class that you were a Techmaturge first, and then generally you were some kind of mage, marksman, or fighter, was kind of like your subclass, but you specified and focused into specifically Techmaturgy. Whereas what it is now is Techmaturgy is a craft, and then you are everything else, whatever your actual class is first. So Techmaturgy is now something that anyone can do without having to specifically multi-class with it. And the general pros that I have found are that means anyone is able to do it, so it is a lot more flexible, and you can do a deeper dive into your specific class. But the big downsides that I have seen is that leveling crafts is substantially slower, so a lot of the stuff that you could do at like level 7 through 9 or so with the Techmaturgy class, you are not getting until substantially later in your regular character progression. But we're going to also look at some ways that we might be able to work around that. The other big thing is one of the systems in Techmaturgy is that you have these devices, these gadgets, these pieces of equipment that utilize energy. And in the class, you had your inherent energy within you as a person, and you could channel that energy into your different gadgets that you had. That is no longer the case, with very few exceptions. And lots of times you wanted to be a tinkerer that makes cool things and have that be your primary thing. I am the person who makes all the gadgets that my players use, and then I sit in a big mecha suit, something like that. And that is no longer an option, so you have to choose something else. For example, in the campaign that we're currently playing, I just designed Julian, who I made a gunslinger, but he didn't really need to be, and he probably won't utilize that because his only real thing that he does is utilizing the inventions that he creates using Techmaturgy. So there are some pros and some cons, and we're going to look at those as well. But the first thing that I wanted to look at and kind of explain is on the wiki, Techmaturgy is kind of split up into two places. So it is split up into the Techmaturgy, which is kind of an overview of magical science in general, what it looks like in different places, where you get energy, and these things called techmaturgical lines or styles. And we're going to look at that a little bit deeper in a minute. The other part that also exists on the wiki is the Techmaturge craft. And the Techmaturge craft is just like all of the other crafts where you've got your attributes, your synergies, what the things are, and most of it, like all the other crafts, is your formulas that you can use. And then the last page is we have our techmaturgical devices and gadgets, which we will look at, that used to be a part of the class itself. So first, I just want to open up the wiki and show where people can find all of this stuff. And if we go down to look at all of the table of contents, chapter 11 currently, and the things are going to be reorganized. I've talked to Ardu about it, that the numbers and whatnot are going to shift as we continue to refine things. But for now, on chapter 11 is called the Techmaturgy, and then we've got this section called gadgets. But then over on the left, up in chapter 4, we have our crafts. So we're going to be looking at the Techmaturgy craft as well as the general Techmaturgy page. So I will be cleaning up and sharing this Google Doc and probably posting it on my website so people can kind of look around and use this as a guide. So for now, we're going to follow this. One of the things that I wanted to note that's going to come up a couple of times is there are consequences for failing your technology roll when interacting with a lot of your creations. However, if you have chosen the techmaturgical line that goes with that particular piece of equipment, you don't have to do the roll, or the roll has different consequences. So if you are doing things within your line, for example, if you are a Hextech Techmaturge and you are only working with Hextech, then it does not matter. But if you are a Hextech Techmaturge that started looking at things from Shurima, well, then you're going to have a little bit harder time understanding how that works. So you can do it, there just is a chance of failure. So let's take a look at the Techmaturgy. So the big part of the Techmaturgy section is, first we are looking at different regions, and there are a couple of places where different words are used to what I believe is mean the same thing, and I'm waiting for clarification on some of that. For example, after our little introduction of the Techmaturgy, it says, below are the most common relationships of magical resources and techmaturgical lines. Later on, it'll talk about techmaturgical styles, and I don't see any techmaturgical styles as its own section, so I'm inclined to believe that those two mean the same thing. So our techmaturgical lines, each region has both a stable and unstable example of what magic and technology combine to look like. So I think the one that most people will be familiar with is Piltover and Zon. Hextech is generally very stable, whereas Chemtech is generally very unstable. Something that is stable is going to be able to be channeled more consistently, conveniently, and a little bit safer, although obviously there are definitely risks. And then unstable are things that they're a little more volatile, a higher risk of something going wrong. So when you are choosing a techmaturgical line, you are going to choose one of these. You might choose Petricite, you might choose True Ice, you might choose Hemomancy. All of these are going to be a little bit different, and these are ways that you channel your magic into a particular invention or device. Some techmaturgical lines like True Ice and Dark Ice have already been used on a large scale in the past. If you are familiar with the lore of the Freljord, I'm sure that's something that you know what I'm talking about. With the technology to use them being lost in recent days, still as a narrative component, it is not impossible that a techmaturgical line could resurface. I think this is just like including half dragons as a playable origin. We only know of one that exists, which is Shyvana, but it's very cool. People are interested, and we want to give people, the opportunity to play these things. So when we talk about techmaturgical lines, these are the ones. Now, the Techmaturge is a lot of this description is just a lot of narrative and kind of explaining that essentially it is a craft, but there is a lot more to it. So we are just going to keep going through. Our techmaturgical expression is going to be through a specific region. So as previously stated, each region has its own techmaturgical lines. They are generated through the resources that are found in that region. This means that the inventions of each region have an aesthetic similarity arising precisely from the use of the elements of that techmaturgical line. And here it just describes what this might look like in the different regions. So if you know you're from Demacia, read the Demacia section. If you know you're from Ionia, read the Ionia section. We're not going to spend too much time on this other than to say not all techmaturgy is the same. Where you are from and the stability of the inventions and creations that you make, those two things come together in your decision-making process to choose your techmaturgical line. There is also an opportunity for you to choose additional techmaturgical lines in the future, so don't feel like you're super duper locked into one thing. If you're from Zon and you choose Chemtech, and then later your party spends a lot of time in Demacia, that doesn't mean you can't make new inventions there, even though there's a lack of Chemtech. You could learn Petricite, and you could start making things with Petricite as well. So that just describes all of those options. Another important thing is the concept of constructs, and constructs, it's just talking about the way that they live and how that they too are, constructed from this general techmaturgical kind of thing. And they have a techmaturgical core of some kind. So one of the things that is true that I think I'm going to ask Ardu what his thoughts are having this innate energy in a construct. If it has some kind of techmaturgical core for some reason, I think it would make sense that the construct has the ability to have some kind of innate energy, which if we look for energy on the construct page, anytime that it talks about it, that is not one of the things that it can do as far as the actual energy resource, instead of energy just meaning like a general concept of a thing that gets things going. So constructs don't have that. Energy is this very, very important resource that gets funneled into generally a cell, a core, or a reactor. These are our sources of energy. Now, the world runes and the world in general have energy as well, and those energies can be channeled into a cell, a core, or a reactor. And there are certain natural ways that you can get it through certain heritages or origins that will also allow you to have your own energy. And the reason that energy is really important is a core part of Techmaturgy is the creation of different inventions, and all of them have a resource, this energy, in order to operate. So if you are running out of energy in your blaster of some kind, well, blaster don't blast with no energy. Now, for our energy sources, as I mentioned, we've got the cells, cores, and reactors. We're going to look at those later. Organisms can have them. Now, I believe that there is an intention at some point in the future to increase the amount of things that can offer energy, because at this time it says some characteristics of class, origin, heritage, enhancements, runes, and rune essences, among others, can provide energy points for a character. At this time, as far as I am aware, which I did check with Ardu a couple of weeks ago, jumping back to this page, there are only 3 ways that a character can have its own energy pool naturally, which is the Chirian or Chirian origin. You get half of your proficiency bonus, and then there are 2 heritages, recognized experiment and bioenergy, that give you half and all of your proficiency bonus respectively. And I believe bioenergy is also currently being looked at because it was highlighted for not an updated translation, which tells me that it's something that's being revisited. So it's really important to note that at this time, which again, we're only in 0.96, things are almost certainly going to change at some point. But at this time, there are very few ways to get energy within yourself as opposed to in your inventions. Recharging a core, we will talk about later. Changing power sources is also described here, and I think the big thing here is you have the ability to shift from a cell to a core of different types, and all of that is described here. This isn't something that I think is going to come up a ton in your campaign unless you are doing a lot of traveling and you are sticking to these rules really closely. For my campaign, I just have Lily has the ability to recharge a lot of these cores, and she does that. So she's been using the same Hextech ones the entire time, rather than, for example, using crystal dust or living crystals, even if they were in an area that was specifically having crystal techmaturgy in general as an accessible thing without Hextech being around. So your ability to change it is important if that is a thing that you are paying attention to, which I would encourage you to, because it exists for a reason, and there's a lot of really, really cool stuff that you can do with it. So that is what is described on the Techmaturgy page. In general, it is what are your techmaturgical lines, and how do you get energy, and what does it look like in the different regions. Now, jumping over to the craft. So the craft is going to list our attributes, synergies, the craft set, and the formulas, and all of those things are the same as every other craft. In that, it is also including the cell, core, and reactor, which again are those things that you put energy into in order to run the rest of your inventions. And all of your inventions are going to require an energy source that is one of those 3 things. So let's take a look at our craft and talk a little bit about it. Very quickly, I wanted to clarify the ways that you can actually acquire the Techmaturge craft, and there are only a handful, and almost all of these are only because you are allowed to choose any craft when you make this selection. So for your origins, a human, a Noctai Chirean, Envoy Construct, and Shimon Vestaya can all select any craft, so you could choose Techmaturge as one of those. For our pasts, Craftsman, Creation, and Inventor can all select any craft. And then for our heritages, Master Artisan, Nazamite Craftsman, Skilled, Technomaniac, and Zanai Experiment can all select the Techmaturge craft. A couple of these can only select the Techmaturge craft, but for most of them, you can choose any craft of yours. So Techmaturge, awesome. Echo is one of my favorites. Jinx, also a Techmaturge. Jace, also a Techmaturge. Heimerdinger, also a Techmaturge. All of them are these inventors that channel the world runes or chemtech or hextech or something into their inventions, which is how, the Fireflies get their masks and their hoverboards and things like that. So our attribute for our Techmaturgy craft is intelligence, which I think is pretty obvious. That would make sense. For our synergies, it has connections with arcana, history, and the technology skill, which is pretty neat. So you can use that to help you analyze an artifact or figure out how it works and whether it's a magic item or not. And then for technology, you can use the Techmaturgy tools as part of a long rest to repair a damaged construct, which can heal 2d10 plus your technology skill modifier, so you can heal any constructs that you know. Then the Techmaturgy set essentially is just, here's a bunch of tools and nuts and bolts and things like that, so there's all kinds of stuff there. Now for the formulas, there are two general formula types. Type number 1 is either called an apparatus, a device, or a gadget, depending on which part of the wiki you are in, and I am hoping that I can talk to Ardu and we can try to find a more consistent naming scheme, because it's called apparatus here, but when it says see more apparatus, this is a dead link. But if we go to down here, and we go to where it says aparatos/en, because it's the English translation of the Portuguese one, then you get the page, but it's been renamed to gadgets. So just a little inconsistent there, and I know that it's between two different versions. So for now, those three words mean kind of the same thing, but we're going to look at those more specifically in a bit. So when we are doing our craft, the two main things that we're doing are an apparatus/device/gadget and everything else. And everything else is where we're going to start. So as a level 1 Techmaturge, you have access to a lot of really cool formulas. You've got this wrench that you can use to help you create future gear. You've got this mask that grants you a bunch of bonus features, and you can store energy there, which is really cool. That is neat, but it does require you to have that particular race, that particular origin, which you might not. The big thing in the level 1 section is cell, core, reactor. Now, a cell is think of it like a small disposable battery. It cannot be refilled. Once it's empty, it is dead. And you can put a new cell in a device, or you can have a device that, once that cell is dead, throw the whole thing away, make a new one, depending on the amount of money you have. But the way that it works is, starting at level 1, it takes you an hour per point, up to a maximum of 5. So for an hour for the first point, plus 30 minutes for each additional, meaning at level 1, in order to fill up to 5 points, which is the most you can have in a cell by default, that's going to take you 3 hours to craft and fill this cell. The thing that is special for these is on the natural 20 table, you do it a little bit faster and you get more, up to a maximum of 8 at Techmaturgy level 5 or 6. And then the higher level you are, the faster you can do it. So Lily, for example, our Techmaturge in our campaign, she is currently Techmaturgy level 5, which means that she could do the entire thing in an hour to do 20 minutes for the first point and then 10 minutes each for the last 4, which is pretty quick. Now, our cell, they're 5 gold plus the cost of the amount of energy that you're putting in a couple of other things. But generally, they're very inexpensive. They're also very easy to be successful with because you only need a DC 13 check to make it happen. Now, our core is like a better version of the cell because it can be used on a bunch of different stuff and you can recharge it. So unlike cells, cores can be recharges, but like cells, cores provide energy points to activate whatever those things might be. They're a little bit more expensive, and it takes a lot longer to charge it, but it's rechargeable so you don't have to make a bunch of them. And if you're playing with all of the specific material components and costs, I think an energy core is going to be a lot more practical, but a cell is relatively inexpensive and you can generate a bunch of them. You're just going to have to generate a bunch of them rather than one and then recharging it. The last one that you can get at level 1 is the power reactor. And if you have the money and you have the materials, a power reactor is by far your best option. The higher the level, the harder it is to be successful. And to get a higher level one or a high level reactor, you also have to have that Techmaturgy level. But the big thing with the reactor is they recharge normally like a core, but they also have the ability to recharge automatically. So you can speed the process up by channeling some kind of energy into it, but it also will passively do it as a self recharge based on the level of magic zone that you're in. So if you're in an area that's a weak magic zone at level 1, it's going to take 2 hours to recharge. But if you are a level 6 and you're in a strong magic zone, it takes a minute to recharge. So you can be using energy really, really fast. So level 1, I think your big things that you're looking at are your cell, your core, your reactor, depending on the amount of money that you have. But just to show a couple of examples of some of these level 1 formulas, the lenses of prey, I just gave kind of a more advanced version of this to one of my players. So the cost is 25 GP plus 10 for each craft level used to create it, because you're doing it faster, you're doing it better. And then it has usually some kind of passive feature and sometimes some active features. So for the lenses of prey, if you spend 1 energy, and if we're imagining a full cell to start that has 5 energy, 1 energy point, you use a bonus action, and you add the lens's level to your perception rolls using sight for 5 minutes. So that's just a nice little bonus to perception. For 2, you can use a full action for a number of minutes equal to half the lens's level. So if you're level 2, then you, for 1 minute, you add that level of damage dealt and half of the level as a bonus to attack rolls. So you can deal more damage and be more accurate if you use 2 energy points, which is neat. Looking at, for example, let's take a look at the first one that we looked at with the Chirian adjustable wrench. So this is one that is prerequisite is specifically that it is crafted by someone of this race. So that does limit you to, for 2 of the, I would say, the most important things that you can craft at level 1 are only for a certain origin. But this is a wrench that can do a couple of things. First, it grants advantage on technology checks to repair equipment, and deals electric damage based on your proficiency bonus. So it is kind of 2 things. It's a weapon, but it's also a tool. Then for another energy point separately, as a part of attack, you can discharge electrical charge from it and deal additional electrical damage. And then for 2 energy points, you can discharge a bunch of it in an area around you. So this one's really cool, really flexible, but again, is tied to that particular origin. But if you notice, most of our tools, the only prerequisite is that you are a Techmaturge, and it doesn't even list a prerequisite up here for almost any of them. Now, to look at a level 2 section, one that I have on the character that I just designed is the energy shield. Now, the energy shield requires Techmaturgy level 2. It's a DC 15 check to do it correctly. You need some kind of energy cell, and even though it says energy cell, it could be a core, it could be a reactor. It is just an energy source would be a more accurate way to say it, I believe. And then it's valued at 50 gold. And for 1 energy point, as a bonus action, you project a 5x5 shield in front of you that can't be moved, and frontal attacks that target you hit the shield instead has an AC of 15, 25 hit points, and if it's not destroyed, it disappears after an hour. So as a bonus action, I could just plop it right in front of me, and then I have some, easy defense in front of me. It's not like it's partial cover that increases your AC or even full cover that just gives the opponent disadvantage. It is in front of you. If someone tries to shoot you, it is going to hit this thing as long as it is coming straight on. Then for 3 energy points, as an action, a force field of hexagonal cells overlaps your armor, and you gain damage reduction of 2, and that effect ends after an hour or if you fall unconscious. So the idea is if you're getting projectiles from the front, you could use the cheaper version, and it'll give you a little bit of a tank in front of you for a moment. And then for 3 energy, then instead it's going to increase your damage reduction by 2, which is pretty good. Another one that I think is really important at level 2 is the Master Craftsman's Gloves, because this is going to help you a lot with your future inventions and creations. This is one that I'm thinking about gifting to our Techmaturge, because for 1 energy using an action until your next long rest, you spend double the GP per day crafting mechanical items. So you are literally crafting twice as fast, and that includes both gadgets and devices, as long as you have all the stuff that you need. And then for 3 energy points, you use a bonus action, and then the index finger of the glove expels a gas, and as an action you can release a spark igniting it. So you release a gas and then explode it for some fire damage. I think the big thing here is just kind of passively, if you put a even just a core in here, you're only expending 1 energy each day that you're crafting, so you can really get a lot done until your next range. You spend double GP per day. I would assume that this does not stack. I would assume that you can't use this 5 times to get, 5 doublings of your speed. And then the last one that I want to look at from level 2 is just one that our Techmaturge Lily uses all the time, which is the holographic cloak. So for 1 energy point, you can use a bonus action to gain a bonus to your spell equal to your intelligence modifier for your stealth, which is great. And then for 2, as a part of disengaging or automatically when you become incapacitated, you become invisible, and 4 illusory duplicates of yourself flee in opposite directions. So that's a really, really good one if you feel like there's a good chance that you're going to die. Then you are kind of preserving your unconscious body so that your friends can find you, which is pretty rad. Jumping down to level 3, I wanted to point out the advanced cell, and the advanced cell charges more. So instead of going up to 5, it goes up to 10 energy points. Each point of energy contained increases its creation value by 5. So it gets a little bit more expensive, but you can do a lot more of it. And I think that advanced cell is going to be something that a lot of people who don't have access to the materials for a core, this is kind of how you get around not having as much infinite feeling sources of energy. But it's also important that energy is not infinite because it is just one thing that you use of your entire kit. But you should have a lot of it because, in my opinion at least, because that is the cool thing that you're doing, is making all these cool things. We also have, cool stuff like portable engines. We've got a jetpack that is pretty sick. Things that can defend. The defensive amplifier makes you tankier, which is really sick. Floating shoes, just a straight up motorcycle. Techmaturgy level 4, DC 20, motorcycle. Motorcycle is capable of carrying up to 2 people, reaches up to 40 kilometers per hour, needs to be supplied with fuel. That's it. It's a motorcycle. And you could make that if you have Techmaturgy level 4. Level 5 is where we start getting into some of the crazy cool stuff. For example, the artillery engine. This is one that Julian in Champions of Runeterra uses. And you either, as an action, can set it up and up to 300 feet away. It deals 8d6 piercing damage to that creature if you hit. But if you spend 6 energy points as an action, you can make a ranged attack against a creature within 300 feet. But on a hit, you deal 8d6 piercing, and anything within 30 feet does a dex save or takes 8d6 fire, which is crazy. That's a lot of damage. Another ridiculous one, automobile. An automobile is capable of carrying 4 people, reaches 60 kilometers per hour. Do you have 5,000 gold, an engine, which is a thing that you can craft, a craft set, and Techmaturgy level 5? Well, guess what? You can make a frickin' car. Do it. Drive a car around. See the people in Demacia blow their minds. That would be awesome. And then level 6, we get to 2 of our absolutely insane things. Quantum probability calculator. Depending on the amount of energy that you're expending, you can use an action to non-magically gain guidance, non-magically cast find traps, non-magically cast commune, non-magically use find path, non-magically cast the Sixth Sense spell. So basically you are getting these really, really cool advanced spells that you can cast without using magic through this tool, which is pretty sick. And then Gravity Manipulator is also really cool. You just reverse gravity and create, AoE gravity attacks, which is so badass. But you have to be Techmaturge level 6, which is not going to happen until incredibly late in your campaign time. So all in all, the crafts are freaking awesome. I also think, which is an important thing to remember for all of the other formulas, the stuff on the wiki or the stuff in the book is not the be-all end-all of formulas. These are just the things that the developers have created but you can create your own. You as the GM, or you as a player talking with your GM, can invent and create your own formulas. I do it somewhat frequently and then just set it to the side until it's a good time. The example that I gave earlier, I had a really advanced version of the Lenses of Prey. I made it a Techmaturgy 3 instead of a Techmaturgy 1, but I gave it to my marksman as a holiday gift. And he doesn't have to know that it was made by someone that he's actually met before. He'll find that out later. You can customize your own formulas is the point that I wanted to make there. So to recap one more time, we looked at the Techmaturgy that has the magical science itself, what it looks like in the different regions, Techmaturgical lines and styles. Actually, I think an important thing to check out really quick back on this page where we do our Techmaturgical styles. When it talks about Techmaturgical lines and Techmaturgical styles, remember, we're pretty sure that those mean the same thing. When choosing the Techmaturgical craft, so when you choose it at level 1, you must choose a style from the styles of your region, or a line. Each time you choose a formula, you can choose a new style that you have studied instead of choosing a new formula, thus expanding the styles to which you have access. Lily, in our campaign, has traveled to almost every region and has, at the very least in my brain, in the background, even if it's not always on camera, has learned a lot about all of these different things. So I have passively just kind of determined she has access to almost all of the Techmaturgical lines, because a big reason that she's traveling is to explore, Techmaturgy in general. Additionally, having multiple styles allows a Techmaturge to both access new inventions and adapt the ones that you already have, making them convert to the use of energy matrices from the different Techmaturgical styles. So if you have access to both something in Shurima and something in the Freljord, and you have a Freljordian device, when you go to Shurima, if you have access to that line, you can convert the cell or the core or the device in general to match that of Shurima so that it blends in and can function using the magic and the energy that's around there. The last thing that I wanted to look at here is the Techmaturgical devices and gadgets. And again, this is one where we have a couple of different words that have been used a couple of different ways in a couple of different places. Now, a device or a gadget is also a formula, but it's highly specialized, and in general, they kind of reshape the way that you facilitate your own combat. And there are 5 major types. So if we jump over here, we can see using gadgets and devices. The Techmaturgical, to use a Techmaturgical item for which you don't have the line or even the instructions, you must make a technology rule DC equals 12 plus the item level for each property. Once a property is activated, activating other properties also requires a technology roll, but that DC goes down. So in the gadgets that we're about to look at, there's a bunch of properties, and you can add these properties, but there is a roll required to do it successfully. But as you do more and more successfully, the difficulty is going to go down. So I want to look at all of these briefly, and we're going to go in a very specific order. We're going to start off with mecha. If you've ever wanted to run around in a big mech suit, you can. You just have to either be a Techmaturge, or have the Techmaturgy craft, or have a friend that does. So mecha can do a couple of things. First, it is important to note that they are very, very expensive. You can do a complete mecha, which is one that you are fully immersed inside the thing. Think like Rumble, where he is in it and it covers his entire thing. But then you can also do kind of like in the Matrix movies, where they just kind of sit in a chair and have some arms that do some shooting. By default, you can't wear armor while you're in a mecha, obviously. But your mecha can have armor if you pay additional gold. And mecha armor has a bunch of different features that has a bunch of different effects. They also talk about the fact that you need fuel. It has the ability to do different types of shielding and has immunities and resistances. So it's really, really good defensively. When using a complete shielding mecha, you get the following characteristics, and there's a super duper long list of them, but easy ones are: it takes damage for you. It takes an action to enter or leave it. Sure, upon entering a mecha, its physical attribute values and speed receive the following changes. Strength becomes that of the mecha, dexterity becomes the crewman's -2, and the mecha constitution is unchanged. So there's some changes that happen when you get in and out of it. There's also partial shielding, where if you have one that doesn't cover the entirety of you, that things work a little bit differently. There is a heating system, just like Rumble, so it can overheat if you use it too much. It talks about hit points, because they have hit points and they can take damage. And an example, a complete shielding medium mecha created at craft level 4 has a total of 4 times 8 hit points equaling 32, because you have complete is 8 and then level is 4. A partial shielding medium mecha created at level 4 is 4 times 5, because the partial is only 5 at large. So it is the shielding level times your craft level plus the development modifiers, if there are any. There talks about ways that you can repair it, ways that you can develop it, things like pneumatic enhancements. Each improvement attribute counts as a development space, so there's a certain amount of times you can develop the thing. This increases their constitution and strength. Exhaust, your mecha has a cooling system that dissipates 1 point of heat at the start of each of its turns, even when it's in combat, so you can use it more and have it relieve some of that overheating that it can do. Some of them have a prerequisite, like the isolation one, you have to have complete shielding. While you're inside of it, you gain advantage on spells and abilities. You could have just the mecha be an entire system, honestly. There's just so much to it. You can give it camouflage, you can make it ability to charge, you can have a pulse, you can add weapons to it, you can have an ejection mechanism, make it go underwater, make it defensive, do better propulsion, give it a hook to grab things, pull a little blitzcrank action, camouflage, sensors, aquatics, thermomechanical converter, so much stuff. You don't have to use all of it, but if there's a thing that you want to use, it's there. I guarantee it. And all of this is just one of our, what we're going to call our gadgets and devices. Then things are a little bit different if you are specifically doing it with Petricite, because it can store magic, which is kind of neat. And then the Turbo Chem Tank is a mecha, and it talks about what that specific one looks like and kind of serves as an example. So mecha, that changes the way that you fight entirely. So if you want, for example, to do you could be some kind of arcane that doesn't take any combat spells, but does a ton of social spells and like transportation spells. And in combat, you are always in a mecha because you are using the Techmaturgy craft. I think that would make sense. So you don't feel like, oh, well, why would I take, Firebolt or Fireball or whatever if I'm never going to use it because I want to be in my mecha. I think that frees up your spells to do something else. But you could also take those, a couple of those spells in the case that you don't have your mecha. Now, the second one is the servo, and servo is really, really sick. And I'm going to read the little introduction here. Servo is a broad term to designate several technological inventions that can perform an immense variety of functions. In common, servo have some characteristics such as being automatons energized by some source of techmaturgical energy. They are autonomous entities to a certain extent. They may have a limited sentience in addition to being able to receive developments through the formulas below. You can control it by talking to it, making it do certain things. And then we've got a couple of examples that we'll look at down here. So the neuron is a basic processing unit that created through several techmaturgical lines, using components of different rarities linked to that line. And a neuron can essentially connect you with your servo. And it says, in campaigns more focused on technological advances, with more advanced elements of magic technology, or even with elements of espionage, the possibility of servo hacking opens up, since there is a connection between servo and controller. So if you are doing some kind of really techie thing, or a lot of your players are techmaturges, throw a techmaturge at them as an enemy that has the ability to hack their servos and maybe turn their drones on them. When you're creating it, the cost is not cheap, but it has some base features. Generally, they are constructs. They have a speed of 30, and they can do a lot of stuff where they are immune to certain things. Their saving throws are all going to be made based on the kind of servo that you have. Your initial features are going to be based on the size for the most part. And let's see, you can also update and repair them in the future. This describes the hacking process that has a psychic defense. We're not going to talk about too much of that. There's also jamming. So both of those things are mechanics for the servo. And there are ways that you can do different kinds of resisting the hijacking or resisting the hacking in general, and there's a whole giant system for that. Now your servo, first one, level 1 through 6, let's look through all of these things. So we're going to assume we're level 1 and we want a servo. Techmaturgy 1, a DC 13, has a base material, a neuron, and then a reactor and a craft set. So this tells me that it can't be a cell or a core, it needs to be a reactor, but I will verify that at another time. The servo is built with its base characteristics added to the initial characteristics, level characteristics, and other developments that are implemented during creation, because there is a lot of different components happening at the same time. Each servo has a number of development spaces equal to the sum of spaces of its size and its level. So if it's a level 3 and it's a large size, to build a servo, it is necessary to have a reactor with a minimum capacity equal to that described in the reactor column of the initial characteristics table. So if you're level 1, then it needs at least 1. The value this reactor is necessary for the servo to function and perform its basic functions with any use of energy points to use characteristics originating from energy provided by additional sources. The value of building a servo is based on the total cost of size in this in the initial characteristics table, the level from the level characteristics table, which is this one, and other developments, and then the value already includes the control device. So your level is based on level and proficiency bonus. The range is the maximum distance a servo can move away from its controller and maintain functional contact, so it can't go an infinite amount away. And then spaces is the number of development spaces that you have. So I want to double check our initial features. So if we're large, 1000 GP, these are our base stats, has 10 HP, 1d6 damage is what it deals. It has 6 spaces, needs a reactor of 4, and energy of 2. Then if we go down to our servo, where it talks about a number of spaces equal to size and level, so it's a large one is 4, and then if it was a level 6, then it has an additional 5 for a total of 9, and that spaces for these improvements and enhancements, such as enhanced shielding. Your neuron is also something that you'll have to create in order to put it in. I also recommend that you have a technological interference device to have interference to occur in some equipment when you want to do some kind of hacking. Then we have all of our developments, and the developments are the things that you use in order to improve it. And the example that I gave of your level 6 Techmaturgy with a large thing has room for 9 developments. That means you can add the ability to attack. You can have it auto repair. You can attach a separate weapon to it. Advanced defense, auxiliary power. Displacement, where it moves around a bunch. Advanced communication is really cool. And a couple of other ones. I like magic coupling. The servo can have a magical item attached to it, as long as your form allows it to be coupled, being able to attune to it, receiving its benefit, or being able to use it in combat in the case of a weapon. So that means if you have magical coupling, you can give your legendary greatsword to your construct that literally just runs alongside you and does its own thing, which is really, really awesome. And you can control multiple at a time. Okay, so a servo can only work while it's within range of the controller, going into standby mode if it leaves the range. Some developments remove that limitation. And then it is possible to simultaneously control a maximum number of servos equal to half the intelligence modifier, requiring attunement to each of them. So you do have to attune to them, but you can run multiple at a time. What I'm interested to know is... So development attack. By choosing this development, the servo becomes capable of taking the attack action against the target. The number of attacks is determined by the level of the craft used. If the servo does not have an attached weapon, the attack is considered an unarmed strike. So that does mean they are autonomous, they get added to the initiative order, and they conduct their own attacks. You are not using your attack for them. So Lily's intelligence modifier is 4, which means she could create 2 servos that are these autonomous beings next to her. While she is also doing combat, she could have 2 constructs under her mental control doing combat without expending any of her attacks or any of her actions, just subconsciously telepathically. That's awesome. That's so sick. And again, this is all just one example of our gadget. So we had the mecha, we had the servo, And then the next couple ones are a little bit easier. I wanted to look at blasters. These are just improvements in the blaster category that you can do on firearms. So if you have a firearm, you can use these enhancements, either turning it into an elixir gun, turning it into a blaster. So for example, Lily uses an elixir gun. The way to make it an elixir gun in the new system, as opposed to it being its own item, is you just have a grenade launcher, you have done an enchantment on it, and now you have made it into a elixir gun. And it can still be used as a grenade launcher, just also shoots elixir. And then it has how you can make all the different capsules, so you can make different ones. There's also a bunch of new ones that I think I want to share with my Techmaturge. I think she might be interested in the one that paralyzes people or explodes into necrotic damage. Would be kind of cool. So I'll take a look at those as well, because I think currently she's only using the 4 basic ones. So we'll take a look at those as well. Projectiles, the same thing is true for arrows or thrown weapons. For the gadget of projectile, these are just ways that you can create the weapon and have some kind of special thing using all of these different enhancements. Does it do tracking? Does it freeze people? Does it explode into shrapnel? And a bunch of things like that. The last one is improved weaponry, which is just enhancements that increase the damage that your weapons do and give them additional features like propulsion with the use of an attack and expending an energy. The creature can move extra distance because essentially it is launching you with its own momentum, which is pretty badass. And then there's just a bunch of different examples. Mercurial enhancement, Techmaturgical modifications as well. There's just a lot of really, really cool options. And all of these you are using in combination with something else. So if you can create a weapon of level 1 through 5 through weaponsmithing, and you are a Techmaturge, then you are able to do some really, really awesome stuff. So it is important to note for a lot of these, improved weapons being an example, if we're looking at our Vibram enhancement, the prerequisite is that we can create a weapon for that particular level and enhance it at the same time. So the craft that we need is Techmaturgy 1 through 6 and Weaponsmith 1 through 6. You get your levels depending on how long you have had that particular craft. So if I am a character that got the Techmaturgy craft at level 1, then I'm level 1, and then when I hit level 5, I get level 2, and then add 4, add 4, add 4, you go up. The only way that you can get up to 6, generally speaking, unless you have specific features, is when you hit level 20. That said, you also need Weaponsmith at the same level, so you need to make sure that you're also getting the craft from there as well. So that is super duper important, that when you are using some of these, as we call them, gadgets and devices, the improved weapons, the projectiles, and the blasters, you have to make sure that you have both of the necessary skills in multiple crafts, not just the one. So looking overall, the things that I wanted to make sure we did is explaining the Techmaturgy, the craft, and then the devices and gadgets. The craft is the main thing. The Techmaturgy page explains some things that are only relevant if you are using the craft, and then also general narrative. And then the devices and gadgets page is describing some really advanced, really cool Techmaturge formulas that you can use in combination with some other things. Energy is something that you get from the world that you channel into a cell, a core, or a reactor. But if you are the Chirien, or you are the recognized experiment, or the bioenergy heritage, then you have the ability to have some of your own energy that you can channel into stuff. The last thing that I wanted to do briefly was just compare Techmaturgy the craft with Techmaturgy the class that used to exist, and talk about what are we gaining and what are we losing. So first, thing that we are losing is the proficiencies, but that just goes with your new class. You're also losing your personal energy pool, which used to equal your level. This is just a straight up nerf to Techmaturgy in general. That said, it looks like cells, cores, and reactors can store a little bit more, so that is kind of nice that you won't need to channel your own energy as much, but it is a bummer that that is so heavily gated and restricted, and I hope that more things open up for that in the future. The other thing that's important that is different is being your own reactor. It's still in some features and traits and whatnot, but generally that is not going to be the case. This kind of goes with having your own personal energy pool. Other thing that you lose is spell casting, but that is now just tied to your other class. So if you are a class that can cast spells, then you haven't actually lost your spell casting. You also lose the dedicated device, except you don't. It's not something you get by default. You're not guaranteed to have it, but it is something you can seek out. So the old device, all of the different ones that existed, it's just other stuff in the formulas. The other thing that we lost with the class going away is competence, and your competence was kind of like your subclass. It was alchemy, armors, machines, mechas, and weapons. With the exception of alchemy, all of these just now exist as formulas, so you still have access to all of those. I would say this is a huge buff for Techmaturgy because you are not tied to one thing. There's a loss of a couple specific features that you get by default, but all of those get added as enhancements that you can invest the time to get anyways, so I would say this is a huge buff for Techmaturgy. And the one that isn't true for that is alchemy, but alchemy is its own craft now. Gadgets are just formulas, so those all exist as well. And then the only other thing that we really lost is the style, which is another form of subclass. There's kind of two, your competence and your style. Asimov was this like pseudo tank healer, and I think that Acolyte is just straight better. And then Gibson was essentially combatant, and then it had some later game features that were kind of cool, like a synergy where when you use a certain amount of energy, you get extra attack. This seems like a really easy thing to make either in enhancement or as a part of like a rune essence. And then Jeter is the one that Lily uses, which is combatant but specifically range. And there are two late game features that were really cool that I don't know if they exist somewhere else or if they're just gone. First one's called Blow Up the Sun, where you convert energy into a giant explosion, which was cool. And then at level 20, you get Consume Energy, where when you kill stuff, you get energy back. However, I was thinking about talking to Ardu about reworking the Amethyst Runic Pulse in order to get your energy back from using that rune, which would be another way that you can do it. So all in all, I would say that the craft can do almost everything that the class could do. The thing that you lose out on is it being your whole identity if you wanted that to be the case. It is opening you up to new things, which I would say is nice, but there are a lot of features that are either really hard to find or they are now spread out all over the place. So to get, as an example, Lily is a level 15 Techmaturgy. For Lily to rebuild a level 15 character and get all of the things that she had with the old class, she would have to go through like every possible section of the wiki to find all kinds of different things that have kind of been split apart to reassemble it. But when you're starting the game from scratch, this is not an issue. I think you look at this and you say, I should be a Techmaturgy because Techmaturgy is really, really cool. With that, I guess just want to close with some action items. I am going to do kind of a more thoughtful write-up of this and post it to our website, championsofruneterra.com, as a little blog post, and then also have some resources here. And I think that's going to be all. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you learned something. I know I certainly did. Techmaturgy is awesome. I highly recommend you choose this as your craft as soon as you are able to. There's just so much cool stuff that you can do with it. Most of the characters in Arcane are Techmaturges, except for Caitlyn, Vi, and Bessa, for the most part. Almost all the other ones do some kind of cool tinkering. So if you're here just because you love Arcane, then you gotta be a Techmaturge. You don't really have a choice. So thank you so much. Please tell someone that you love them. Do not forget. Do not forget, because they don't hear it enough, and neither do you. So thank you so much. I love you, and goodbye.